Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, welcome to the channel, and we do this every week, so if you do want to stay up to date, this is the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about, except I don't really have anything new to announce this week, so I just want to give a quick mention to Alex over at Boardgame Co, because this is likely the last video that I'll be posting for upcoming campaigns for 2024, because once we start getting into the month of December, things really slow down, and if you do want to have some additional content over that time, him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns. I post these every week, but he posts these at the start of each month, going over the entire month, and then you know of the heavy hitters for that month. If there's any other games announced for the month of December, he will have you covered in that video, but he also posts a ton of other content as well, so even if there's nothing new for the rest of the year, he will still be posting up a bunch of new content of his own. There are a few other crowdfunding platforms that Alex and I don't cover, and the reason for that is because they are exclusively for historical war games, so if that is a genre you are interested in, I'm not sure if there's going to be anything new for the month of December, but if there is, Zilla Blitz will have you covered because he also posts up a video each month. Then you know of the campaigns launching that month for the historical war games. As always, you can find a link to both these channels in the description down below, and you can subscribe if you do like their content, but that is everything I have for an intro, and we only got a few games to cover this week, but there are some good ones, so let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on December 3rd, and this one is called Enormity. And this one's interesting because it is the next game being offered from Into the Unknown, who also happen to be the same team that brought you the game Aeon Trespass Odyssey, as well as a few others. And if you're not familiar with this game, this was a giant, sprawling, cooperative adventure game that made quite a splash back when it was released. And Enormity is also a cooperative game, and it does borrow and build upon some elements that you would have seen back in Aeon Trespass Odyssey, but this one is very much its own game, and the creators even describe it as the cosmic love child of 20th century hard science fiction, aliens, Lovecraft, and a touch of Star Wars. After looking into it myself, I would say Event Horizon is a really good parallel here, but maybe this isn't quite as popular, so I'm not sure if it was an influence here, but it does share some elements for sure. From a gameplay perspective, this one's a horror extraction exploration dungeon crawler, and it can be played as one-off scenarios or overarching campaigns. And the way that all of this is managed is that depending on the scenario that you're playing, there might be some specific rules and objectives for that scenario, but there'll also be a deck of cards associated with that scenario that can trigger unknown effects and events depending on the decisions of the players, and those can also give you objectives to see you through the rest of that scenario. But the reason that this one is described as an exploration dungeon crawler is because you can go at your own pace in this game. Exploration is encouraged, and you can go off the beaten path as much as you want because you are exploring a massive ship in this game, and there is a lot to explore with almost an infinite amount of paths that you can take that will connect back to different points in the ship. And this is all going to be provided through different spiral-bound books that will actually have you connecting them together in different ways, depending on how you explore the ship and what sort of secrets and shortcuts you might discover. Each player also has their own asymmetrical character that they're going to be playing as, which each have their own role amongst the crew, which is going to be reflected in their special abilities as well as their stats. Each of these characters can also be upgraded in a number of ways, either by finding different gear or items that you can equip to them, but they each also have a progression tree which you can level up and unlock new abilities and different effects. But my favorite part of the upgrading in this game is the way that you upgrade your action cards, because each player is going to have 3 double-sided action cards that they're going to be using to take actions with throughout their turns. But this is a game that uses card crafting, which means that each of these cards is actually constructed out of 2 other cards. You're going to be pairing them together and putting them into a sleeve in order to determine what's on one side and what's on the other. Of course, you can discover more of these cards as you play throughout the game. You'll be able to gain new cards to swap out with your existing ones in order to make your actions even more powerful, but you'll really want to think about which cards you pair together, because although you can use all 3 of your cards in a single turn, you're only allowed to use one side of that card. Each side of the card could also give you multiple options, creating even more permutations of the different combos that you can create. And I really do like how they give you so much opportunity for comboing, but then they temper it by restricting you to just one side of each card. Players can get some additional flexibility on their turn by gaining some stress, and there are also just certain actions that cause you stress. This is something that you're going to have to manage throughout the game, but there are also actions that allow you to lower it. But for the most part, players are going to be using their actions to scavenge resources and knowledge from the ship in order to discover the mysteries of the ship, develop new technologies, upgrade or craft new gear and weapons, or even to just interact with points of interest to complete different goals, modify the board in different ways to open up or close off different paths or do something completely different, or even cause different events to occur. Players are going to be taking turns moving and then taking these actions by using their action cards, but then the enemies are also going to have a turn and they're going to be roaming around the ship, and at first they're going to be represented by a token until they enter the board adjacent to a player. They're mostly going to move in the direction they're facing, but players can also generate noise depending on the actions that they decided to take, and depending on how much noise they ended up making, they can actually draw those enemies towards them and also grant them with additional movements. There's a whole variety of different enemies that you could go up against, all with their different stats and effects, and when you do engage in battle in this game, you're going to be rolling dice, comparing your attack values to their defense, and of course taking into account any weapons or gear and any modifiers or any special effects that come along with those. Another really cool aspect of the combat in this game is that both you and your enemies do get more powerful as you become closer to death, and there is also a stealth mechanism that the players can try to utilize in order to avoid combat altogether, and this is really nice because it's going to be granting you with multiple options for how you want to approach each scenario. In order to progress most scenarios, you're going to be trying to make a certain amount of discoveries, and that's going to be moving you up these tracks of different colors. And these different colors do also represent the enemies getting stronger, so there is no avoiding it. The enemies are going to get more powerful no matter what you do, as long as you're completing the mission. But the game continues like this, with players exploring the ship, making those discoveries, and trying to complete the objectives of the scenarios. And if you're able to do all that and also survive, then you can move on to the next one. And if you do want to learn more about this game and what else the campaign might have to offer, you can go ahead and find it, and I will have it linked in the description down below. And also launching on December 3rd, we have a new expansion for the game Cthulhu Death May Die, and this one is the Forbidden Reaches expansion. And I should mention that Cthulhu Death May Die is also my #1 co-op game of all time, so it's no surprise that this one is my own personal pick of the week. And if you're wondering why I like this game so much, I just think it does such a good job with the challenge it offers, but then it also offers a ton of variability with the different characters that you choose to play as, the different elder ones that you want to go up against, but also each of the scenarios can offer their own elements that you don't see in any other scenarios, and I've been really impressed with the variety that each scenario brings into the game. This is also a game that just constantly ramps up as you're playing it, and everyone at the table, including the monsters, are getting more and more powerful, but what I really like about the power that you gain in this game is that it also comes with a cost. Each of the characters in this game are going to have good and bad things about them, and one of those bad things is that each player is also going to have their own specific illness. And as you go more and more insane throughout the game, you're going to be unlocking your different abilities, but it's also going to be triggering that illness. And what I love about this is that this is a game that rewards careful and clever planning, because if you time your illness at the right time or use the right ability at the right time, that's going to make a big difference of whether or not you win the game. And there's going to be constant trade-offs like this and decisions that you're going to have to make, trying to end up with the overall better outcome. This is a game that not only rewards you for those clever decisions, but each game you have is going to be telling its own story, often with some really funny elements, like walking into a room full of enemies where you would most certainly die, and the only reason you survived is because your narcolepsy kicked in, you fell asleep, and the monsters didn't notice you. And this is a game that's already had several Kickstarter and Gamefound campaigns in the past, so there is already a ton of content out for this one, and I have covered this one during those previous campaigns, so if you do want to learn more about what the original game is like and what was previously offered, I will roll some of that previous footage for you in a second here. But before we do that, I will let you know what this new expansion is going to be adding, because it's going to be adding 2 new Elder ones that you'll be able to mix into the game, 6 new episodes along with new locations. And something that I do like about these new locations, and the reason reason that I think it's called Forbidden Reaches is because I think a lot of these are going to be more paranormal and unnatural locations, and I expect and hope that they will be based off of locations from the actual Lovecraft stories. And this campaign will be offering everything previously released for the game, so if you're interested in any of the previous seasons, expansions, or promos, like the Godzilla miniature that was only offered at the different conventions, this is going to be another opportunity to get your hands on those. But the absolute biggest part of this new expansion is that they're also going to be introducing a giant Godzilla miniature, much like the Cthulhu miniature that was offered a few seasons back. And I'm using the word miniature loosely here because these are the size of a small child. And that's pretty much all the info I have on this, other than if you were a previous backer, they are also offering a special bonus, which is another nice reason to check this one out. And if you do want to check it out, I will have it linked down below, and you can go ahead and follow along to get notified once it launches. And as I mentioned, I will go ahead and roll my previous footage for you now. If you're a fan of games like Zombicide, this one isn't too far a stretch from that game, but I think it adds so much more that makes it a lot more fun, at least for me. It shares a lot of similarities in that it is scenario based, where you're going to be trying to complete different objectives that are outlined by that scenario, and you're going to be setting up the scenario according to the booklet. But each scenario is also going to come with its own little box of components and some different mechanisms that make the scenarios quite a bit different from each other. And I was really impressed with the variety that you get with these scenarios. Some of the scenarios actually feel like a completely different game in the amount of variety that they offer. But in addition to this, you can actually mix and match the scenarios with the different final bosses or elder gods that the game offers, and there's quite a lot of those as well, and they all play a little bit differently and are of varying difficulties as well. So if you feel like a scenario is too hard, you can always mix it in with one of the easier final bosses, or vice versa. But then, of course, there are a lot of different characters, and all the characters have different abilities and different upgradable abilities. And then on top of that, you're also going to mix in a different insanity with each of your characters, and that's also going to give you something of an ailment that can be very costly to you, but if you use it appropriately, it can be super beneficial. And that's where a lot of the fun comes in this game, because each of your insanities is going to be triggered by some sort of event, and you're going to be trying to time that so that when that insanity triggers, it's going to give you something beneficial. For example, your insanity could be that you are a pyromaniac, and whenever that gets activated, you're going to be setting fire to whatever location tile you're currently on, which can be really harmful if your teammates are there. But of course, if you time it right and there are a bunch of enemies there, well, it sounds a lot better if they're the ones dealing with those consequences. You might be asking, how do these insanities actually get triggered? And this is going to happen anytime your insanity meter reaches one of these red orbs, and each player is going to be tracking this on their own personal player sheet. And the way that your insanity increases is through a variety of ways, but mainly it's through dice rolling. And there's going to be tentacles on some of the dice, and if you happen to roll that tentacle, it's going to increase your insanity. You're going to be rolling these dice anytime you enter combat, so this is always an opportunity to increase your insanity, which you might want to do to try and trigger your illness, but it also allows you to level up one of your character stats anytime that you hit one of those red orbs, so it does have a few effects that you can take advantage of, but you don't want to push it too hard, because if you ever reach the end of your insanity track, well, you go completely insane and you are eliminated from the game. So this creates a really amazing and fun dynamic where there are a bunch of competing goals here, because you want to increase your insanity so that you can level up your character, but then you also only want to hit those red orbs at certain moments so that you can maximize the effects of whatever insanity you have associated with your character. But then you also don't want to level it up too quickly, because it can cause you to completely go insane and be eliminated from the game. And of course, those dice that I was referring to are also going to be used to land hits or avoid hits, so you're not only going to be worried about the tentacles whenever you enter combat. So there are a lot of elements at play here that you are trying to manage. But it's not all death and insanity, because you can actually issue rerolls by using your stress. So it's death, insanity, and stress. And with all that said, it's no surprise that this is my favorite co-op game ever made, so this one is also my personal pick of the week. I really love this game, and every game impresses me, and every game is a lot of fun. And what I really love about this game, opposed to Zombicide, is the way that the enemies work. In Zombicide, I feel like I'm always managing a whole bunch of hordes of zombies, and it's a lot of overhead, and all the zombies kind of act the same, whereas all the enemies in this act very differently from each other and have very different effects. And there is still a bit of management there on the enemy's turn, but it just doesn't feel as cumbersome as it does in Zombicide. And I guess I should probably mention how you actually do win the game, and it does vary from scenario to scenario, but they all kind of follow the same structure. And that's that there's going to be some sort of objective that you're trying to achieve in order to disrupt a ritual. And once you disrupt the ritual, that's going to cause the boss monster to get summoned onto the board. But it is also possible for the boss to get summoned to the board before you disrupt the ritual, and if that happens, the boss is essentially invincible until you achieve that objective. But the way that happens is that you're going to be drawing cards at the end of each of your turn, and there's always a chance that those cards can cause the boss monster to move up this track, and if it ever hits the red area, then it's going to get summoned to the board. When this happens, you just replace the monster on the board with a token that you're going to use to track it moving forward, and then if that token ever reaches the end of the track, well then that's another way that you lose the game. But once that Elder God is summoned onto the board, players are going to be doing everything they can to try and destroy it. But of course, it won't be easy because there's going to be a whole bunch of other enemies getting in your way, and of course, you are fighting an Elder God, so that's pretty incredible already. But not only that, each Elder God is also going to be going through multiple different stages, adding new special abilities to their arsenal, which is going to make them progressively more difficult, and you're going to have to defeat them at all of their different stages if you want to win the game. Did I mention that this is a really difficult game? This new expansion is going to be a standalone edition of the game, so you can decide if you want to get just the old content or the new content or both. I did go all in the first campaign, and there is quite a lot of content there. I haven't played through all of it yet, but I do expect that I will eventually. I think I'm 3/4 of the way through all the scenarios. But that being said, every one of the scenarios is very replayable, and I have already played multiple of the scenarios over again, and it always results with a very different outcome, especially when you can change up your different characters and your insanities and the different final bosses that you're going to be going up against. So I really don't think you need all of this content, and if you're on the fence, you're probably best just choosing one or the other, whichever one looks more appealing to you, and just sticking with that. But if you're like me and this is one of your favorite games of all time, then yeah, you should probably go all in, because that's what I'm going to tell myself. And of course, this new expansion is going to be adding a lot more of the same with some new tiles, new cultists, new scenarios, and new enemies and great old ones. But it's also going to be adding a new concept of unknown monsters. And the way that these work is that you're going to be randomly selecting 2 at the start of the game. And then there's going to be certain events that will trigger those monsters being entered into the game. And you can mix those with the original content as well. And yeah, that will make an already difficult game more difficult. So if you are including those unknown monsters, then you'll probably also want to include the new module, which is the relics module. And the way that the relic cards work is that in addition to picking your character and your insanity, you'll also be able to choose a relic card at the start of the game. This is going to give you an additional special ability, and it will also get upgraded to a more powerful version of that special ability at some point in the game once you've hit a certain insanity threshold. So that's a really good tool if you want to make the game just a little bit easier, or if you want to balance it back to the difficulty that it is originally, if you're including some of these other modules that make the game more difficult. And of course, there's going to be a whole stack of new investigators that you can play as well as new discovery cards. And my most favorite addition is a bunch more insanities, because the one qualm I did have with the original game is that there's really not many insanities, and they are a ton of fun, and they actually create some pretty hilarious scenarios when they play out in certain ways. And I just always wanted to see a lot more added to the game, and I'm really glad to see that that's actually happening. And also launch on the 3rd, we have the 40th anniversary edition of the game Tales of the Arabian Nights, and this one is a competitive storytelling game where players are trying to be the first to reach a certain amount of points. There's 2 types of points that players can earn in this game. There's the destiny points, and then there's the story points, and you're going to need a certain total amount of these points to win the game. But at the start of the game, you're going to be able to decide what you want that ratio to be. So not only are you trying to get a total amount, but you're also trying to get a certain amount of each. This is a game that's really easy to teach and play, because even though there is definitely some gameplay elements here, this game is mostly about the narrative and the stories that it creates. And it does do a really great job at that, and that's one of the reasons why it's ranked so highly on Boardgame Geek and why so many people love this game. But this is a game that plays over a series of turns, and on your turn you're basically going to be moving your character and then drawing an encounter card. The amount of movement that you get on your turn is based on your current wealth, which you're going to be trying to increase throughout the game, but every time you draw an encounter card, it can have some different results depending on your location. And then also with this new edition, they're adding in the concept of morning, noon, and night, and you can actually get different results depending on what time of day it actually is. And you can see an example of that right here where you have different numbers depending on the time of day. And you're going to be combining those numbers with the location where you drew that card. And that's going to be taking you into the storybook, which is then going to tell you what you encounter there and the different options you have to respond to it. Of course, there's going to be a whole bunch of different results depending on what you choose, but of course you want a result that's going to be either gaining you wealth, items, or skills, or different quests that you might be able to accomplish, or of course gain you either of those types of points so that you can potentially win the game. The neat thing about gaining skills in these different encounters is that those skills can actually change the outcome of encounters that you have in the future. So this is a game that just offers a whole variety of endless permutations that's going to offer a very different story every time that you play this game. Of course, there are also a bunch of negative consequences and statuses players can end up in as well, but this new edition is going to be adding some brand new experiences into the game with new encounters that you can explore, as well as different characters that you can play as. There's also a solo mode added to the game, brand new artwork, as well as some small changes to the rules to make it a little bit less punishing in certain situations, a little quicker to play, adjusting the amount of points you need based on player count, and then of course the change with the morning, noon, and night, which I mentioned earlier. If you're interested in this one, I will have it linked down below, and of course you can go ahead and click to get notified. And also launching on December 3rd, we have Viking Route, and this one's a cooperative Viking adventure game where players are going to be playing as asymmetrical Vikings with different powers and stats, and players are going to be going on different adventures across the sea, fighting Loki, Hela, the Kraken, and many others. A really cool aspect of this game is that there's two different boards that players are going to be sharing. There is the ship board and then there is the sea board. And the way that this works is that the ship board is where players are going to be moving their characters around in order to gain access to the different locations on that ship, with each of those locations offering a different action. But the ship is also represented out on the seaboard, and the way that it's represented is with this compass, and the north-facing needle on that compass represents the direction your ship is going. And this is where a really interesting mechanism comes into play that I haven't seen in any other board game, and that's that there's going to be these other tokens that are going to be influencing that compass in order to change your direction, because each of those components are going to have magnets in them. Some of these tokens are going to be representing the wind, which of course is going to have an influence on your movement, and then the other tokens are going to be representing ravens sent by Odin in order to guide your ship, and I imagine it's these tokens that the players are going to have a little bit more control over. Because compasses are magnetic, it's going to be pointing in a different direction depending on how it's influenced by those different wind and raven tokens. Players are going to be using their resources and cards in order to confront different opponents and achieve the goals of their specific quest. And like I said, the different locations of the ship are going to be granting you with different actions to choose from. The ballista is going to allow you to fire your cannons. The deck is going to allow you on and off the boat and also allows you access to your god cards. The lookout allows you to manipulate the wind and raven tokens, whereas the sails allow you to adjust your speed. And then there is the hold, which is going to allow you to store or recover food, weapons, and other materials. And then of course the tiller is used to steer the ship. The game can be played as one-off scenarios or as a campaign playing through the different scenarios offered with the game, but what's really cool about the one-off scenario mode is that there's different rules and variables that you're going to be incorporating to make those one-off scenarios very different from each other, even if you happen to play them over again. The different scenarios can also take you to different locations, which each also have their own unique board, and players can go up against all sorts of different bosses. And as you play through the campaign, you're going to be first going up against a kraken. Then the second scenario is going to have you searching for Baldur while going up against Hela, the goddess of death. The third scenario is going to have you face the wolf Fenrir. And then the next scenario, you're going to be facing the snake Jormungand. I'm definitely saying that wrong. Then the final scenario has you attempting to prevent Ragnarok by fighting against Loki. Of course, if you are interested in this one, I will have it linked down below where you can go ahead and check it out and see what else it has to offer. And of course, click to get notified if you do want to get notified once it launches. And that's everything for this week, but don't leave yet because we still got a few awesome giveaways to announce, and these are going to be for 3 different party games. And the first one is for Coffee Up, and this one is a game where there's always going to be one player acting as the barista. Then you're going to have different cards of different people that have their name as well as their order. The player as the barista is going to be drawing these, reading out their name and order, and then handing that card to one of the other players. And then that player is the only one that's allowed to look at that card, whereas the other side of the card is just going to have the image of that person. Players will want to try and remember the name, the order, and the image of that person because players are going to be taking turns pointing at a card in another player's hand and then specifying either the order, the name, or both in order to make sure they're getting the right orders to the right people. If the players are able to do this well enough and not lose all the stars in their cafe's review, then the players win the game. And this giveaway is going to get you a copy of the game, and I'm going to be running all 3 of these giveaways over on the Discord because I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to be putting up a video next week in order to draw the winner myself. But in order to find the Discord, I will have it linked in the description down below. All you got to do is head over to the giveaways channel and then click the little emoji underneath that giveaway, and that'll get automatically drawn at the end of the week. And I know it's hard to trust signing up to things, so I just want to let you know that I do have all notifications turned off for my Discord by default, so you're not going to get spammed by anything by going and visiting the Discord. And the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for Spellwards, which is another party game, but this one is a word party game. And the way that this game works is that each player is going to have a hand of letter cards, but then there's also going to be a card in the center of the table, and then players are going to be racing to try and create a word starting with the letter on the table, but ending with one of the letters in their hand, but then also the length of the word needs to match the length specified on the card that they're playing. The first player to get rid of all their cards first wins the game, and this giveaway is going to be for a copy of the game. And just like the previous one, all you got to do is head over to the Discord in the description down below, check out the giveaways channel, and click the emoji underneath that giveaway. And the last giveaway we have this week is for a pledge for Fly for Pie, which is a print and play board game. And the way this game works is that each player is going to be playing as a hand glider with their own little pet bird. And players are going to be spending movement in order to move around on the board, but what's cool about the way that movement works in this game is that you can move any distance in a straight direction. Players are going to be trying to collect berries, and there's different obstacles that you may or may not be able to fly over depending on how much weight you're carrying, and players are trying to make it back home with as much points as possible before the incoming storm, and the player with the most points that's able to do that is going to be the winner of the game. This giveaway is going to get you the upgraded version of the game, and just like the previous ones, all you got to do to enter this is click the emoji underneath that giveaway. And I do have this set up to draw 3 winners since we do have 3 prizes here, and the prize that you win is going to be determined by the order that the names are drawn. But now let's go ahead and draw the winners for last week's giveaways, and we had Park Life, which is a really fun trick-taking game. I actually played this with a few friends last week and we had a blast. Planepita, which is a really fun dexterity flicking game, and then Revenant, which is a really cool worker placement game, and it's the next game from Mind Clash Games. And in order to draw a winner, I'm going to be using this fancy application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries for my members over on Ko-fi that help make all of this possible. I do all this coverage for free for publishers so that I can give you the most comprehensive coverage, and it's the support over on Ko-fi that makes all of this a little bit more sustainable for me. If you're interested to check that out, I will have a link to it in the description down below, but the first giveaway we're going to draw for is for Park Life. So I've already thrown in the hashtag here, so let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw the first winner here. And the winner of Park Life is Bogglesby, and he says he's got nothing too exciting planned for the holidays other than eating, visiting family, and playing a few games. And that sounds a lot like how my holiday is going to be as well, and honestly that's what the holidays are for, so I hope you have a ton of fun playing games and seeing the family. Maybe even playing games with the family if they are open to it, but if not, the food is always a good fallback. Congratulations on the win. Just email me at adam@shelfglider.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out for you. And now let's go ahead and draw the winner for Planepita. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. Let's just change this to Pita. Draw those comments and draw the winner. And the winner of Planepita is Chaos, who is one of the fantastic members over on Ko-fi, but I have a feeling he's probably going to pass this up and ask me to redraw it, so I will reach out to him and figure that out before I post this video, but I'll go ahead and redraw this just in case, and if you're seeing this footage, then that is what happened. So let's pick another winner. And the winner is Phil Turner, who is also from Ko-fi. So Phil, I'll reach out to you and let you know that I won yourself a pledge here. Thanks much for the support, and I hope you enjoy this one. And I'll just go ahead and draw the lucky winner for Revenant. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. I already threw in the hashtag. Let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw the winner. And the winner of Revenant is Sluggatron, who is also a member over on Ko-fi. So thanks so much for the support. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a really sweet pledge here. And that is everything I got for you this week, and probably for the year. I will most likely put up 1 or 2 more videos before the year is up. I do want to put together a video going over the games that I either backed or was very close to backing over the past few months and let you know why or why not I made that decision. I'm not sure if I'll do much else other than that. I'll probably just use my time to try and wrap up some of the many projects I have going on so that I have more time for these videos in the future. But it's been a really great year for board games, and I've been genuinely impressed with the quality of games that have been released, especially in the second half of this year. I used to think there'd be some sort of plateau with games where we've just done everything and it's hard to innovate or create anything new. But I think a better way to look at it is that board games are kind of like music, and you have a finite amount of chords, but you can still create quite a wide variety of music. Every once in a while, there's new technologies or instruments or genres thrown into the mix. And it's also kind of funny that some songs can have the exact same chord progression and still sound miles different from each other. For example, you probably didn't know that Wonderwall has the exact chord progression as Boulevard of Broken Dreams. And I'm probably taking the analogy a little too far, but what I'm trying to say is I just think it's really impressive at the variety of games that we are able to offer with just a seemingly finite amount of mechanisms and tools and components in order to make all that happen. I don't think games are slowing down anytime soon, and I'm excited to see what 2005 has to offer. But until then, I hope you enjoy the rest of your year and have a fantastic new year. Stay safe, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.